Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Faithful Healing with Hannah. On today's episode, one of our viewers found herself in a toxic relationship with a Muslim boyfriend and is asking what should she do. For the first time on my channel, I am going to be breaking down how toxic Haram relationships work, why so many people find themselves sucked into them, and why they're so hard to escape. We'll also be talking about procrastination in life and in Salah, and we'll answer a question from a viewer who is asking when he should stop making dua for a girl who is not Muslim. All that and more on Faithful Healing. So let's get into it. If you are new here, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hannah, and on this show, I try to help Muslims just like yourself navigate difficult situations through my experience as a trauma and self improvement coach. If you'd like to submit your questions to be posted on the show, you can go to the link in the description. On any of the podcast episodes, that link will be present and submit your question. Now, submitting a question does not guarantee that the question will be presented on the show, but if it is selected out of the many questions that I do get, you will be emailed, inshallah, and notified as to what show it'll be on. Otherwise, if you're watching this live, then please chat it up in the chat box as usual and let me know where you're tuning in from, inshallah. So for anyone who's joining in as of now, let me know. Give us salam in the chat box. We always do this, and let me know where you're watching from. With that being said, let's jump into the video of the day. This is a video that truly warmed my heart. It was so sweet, inshallah, but I will let you guys decide for yourself how you feel about it.
أحب الله لقاء.
خافي من الموت؟
أنا من أحب لقاء الله أحب الله لقاءه.
انت ضامنه لقاء الله؟
طبعا أنا بحب لقاء الله.
انت ضامنه راح تروح تلاقي الله؟
والله أحسن الظن في الله إنه أنا ألاقيه ويقول لي كم حفظتي من القرآن الكريم؟ اقرأ ورقة وسأعطيك.
بلكي كل شيء عملتيه ما وصلك له.
بدخل برحمة الله. الله وزع لنا رحمة واحدة على كل هالأمة يتراحموا فيها، وحاشر عنده 99 رحمة. ال 99 إذا برحمة هالقد عايشين متراحمين، فما بكم 99 نقضي يوم القيامة نسبح فيهم سباحة. أنا ليش لا أظن بالله إلا ظن الحق وظن التفاؤل؟ ليش أنا دائما أظن سلبي
مو سلبي احنا خلقنا بكبد، احنا
ما ندخل بأعمالنا بنرتفع.
النفس أمارة بالسوء. احنا مقصرين تجاه أنفسنا تجاه الآخرين. طيب وضمنانين الجنة؟
لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. أنا قد ما الله يعطيني بعمل، الله بيعرفني أنا قديش طاقتي، فبعطيني شغل أكثر.
خافي من الموت؟
Subhanallah. As a self-improvement coach, you'll see on videos and even when I'm just working with one-on-one clients, we talk a lot about mindset shifts that are God conscious, right? Rooted in deen, rooted in your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I absolutely loved that video because I feel that woman is a perfect example of what happens when your mindset becomes like deen oriented and you see nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, metaphorically, of course. For those who are watching live, please, again, give us salam in the comment section, in the live chat, and let me know where you're tuning in from, inshallah. So if you're not too familiar with, why she's saying what she's saying, she reminds me of a story of a woman that some scholars speak about, centuries ago. And she was known as a woman who only spoke in Quran. And anytime someone spoke to her, she would reply with a verse of the Quran. She was a really beautiful example of what it means to only speak with good, right? And so she was actually applying the words of the Prophet ﷺ. This woman is doing the exact thing. All of her answers are rooted in Quran and Hadith. So when she's saying, am I afraid of death? And she's being asked, am I afraid of death? Her answer is, why would I be afraid of death? I love to see, I want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is she saying that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that those who love to meet Him, He loves to meet them, right? And those are the people that there's no fear upon them or grief on the day of judgment or in the akhirah, right? So she's referencing that. The interviewer tells her, okay, but how do you know that what you've done is going to get you into Jannah? She replies, You don't enter into Jannah except by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's also from the Quran. We do not enter into Jannah because of the good things we do. We enter because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to attain His mercy to enter. The things that we do out of obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is His right, that we obey Him, and because it is for our own greater good, right? But at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to allow us to enter into Jannah by His mercy. And there's actually a hadith about this you guys might not be familiar with, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us about a man who on the day of judgment is going to ask to be entered into Jannah based on his deeds. And so the story goes, very briefly, there's a man, incredible worshiper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is kind of before the Prophet ﷺ time. They used to say he used to constantly make hijrah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was always doing good. He was constantly exhausting himself in worship. And so this man is going to pass away, and on the day of judgment he will be told by the angels that guard heaven to enter into Jannah by the mercy of Allah. And this man will say, I don't want to enter by the mercy of Allah. I want to enter based on my good deeds. And so the angels will again tell him, enter by the mercy of Allah. And they'll say, no, he'll say, I want to enter by my good deeds. And so they basically, report this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah tells them, okay, I want you to take all of the good deeds that this man has ever done. And by the way, again, this is an emphasis that his worship is beyond any worship any of us have done. Like, it was emphasized in the hadith that this man's worship was incredible. All of his good deeds, I want you to put them on a scale. There's essentially a scale that weighs the blessings of what is put on it. And so all of his good deeds were put on one side of the scale, right? These are his good deeds. And on the other side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to just put the blessing associated with vision on the other side. And what ends up happening? The scale tips, and the blessing of vision, other way. The blessing of vision is so heavy that it outweighs his good deeds altogether. His good deeds fly off. And so the angels are then commanded, take him to where he belongs based on the measure of his deeds. And obviously, the measure of his deeds does not outweigh even the single blessing of vision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how many blessings does Allah give us beyond vision? If you are watching this, you're breathing. If you're watching this, your heart is pumping. If you're watching this and able to actually understand what I'm saying, you have a brain that is functioning at a capacity that even the best of scientists of this world don't understand. That's just a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's given us, so we enter by His mercy. So it's a beautiful, beautiful video, inshallah. If you guys are coming in now and you don't know what I'm talking about, I just showed a quick clip of a beautiful video. And to everyone who's giving salam, wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from London, wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let us know where you are tuning in from. Alrighty, let's jump into the questions, you guys. As you know, for those of you guys who have been on here for a while, I forgot what episode number we're on, but I take submissions from people, and we do live coaching. I coach them through the exact issues that they are dealing with. So give me one moment, inshallah, as I get this up and running for you all. Okay. Let's jump into the first submission, inshallah, from Yasmin in the Netherlands. So thank you so much, Yasmin, for submitting your question. And the question goes as follows. Dear Hannah, my question is mostly about procrastination, i.e. work, school, prayer. I have been suffering from this for years, especially now that exams are coming up and I still can't resist grabbing a book and studying. And since a year, I have been struggling to keep praying 5 times a day. I would pray them all together or not at all. I used to be always motivated about all kinds of things like going to study or going out with my friends, but now it's even hard for me to contact them or my family. Lately, it just feels like too much for me. I also often get comments about what is going on with me. Usually I avoid it and say everything is fine. Sometimes it just seems like everything is getting worse, my self-esteem, grades, and social skills. I prayed to Hajj several times for this, hoping it will be accepted. I also notice when I feel good, it's usually when I'm sitting by myself and spending my time on useless things like social media. And otherwise, I feel empty. I don't understand where this comes from, even though I have my suspicions. I used to be surrounded by people who mostly didn't want to see me properly. Because I have decided to be better and break contact, it feels like the evil eye is from them. I make dua every day against the evil eye, sihr, etc. My sihr is black magic for those of you guys who don't know the wording. My family has often been victims of the evil eye. Sometimes it seems like nothing works. As an example, my parents had the whole house renovated, and a few people came to see how beautiful it has become, and the next day, a lot happens to be broken. Or when I used to do my hair loose, I used to get compliments on how thick and long it was and how beautiful curls I had, and now I suffer from severe hair loss and hair thinning. I'm so ashamed of this whole situation. It seems like there's no end to it. It would be really immensely nice if you could help me with this because at some point, I think this has been enough. I think many people have the same situation as me, and I hope this could help others too. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your efforts in making this account for the purpose of giving people an overview of life. Wa alaikum assalam. P.S. This has nothing to do with the post, but it would be nice if you can make dua for me that my parents let me wear hijab. Okay, awesome. So thank you again so much, Yasmin, for the submission and the question. There's a lot here, and again, for the lay person, you might see this and wonder, where do you even start? So the few things that I kind of want to talk about. It's for those of you guys who don't know, I also practice medicine. So I'm gonna exit out of this and just show you guys my face. I practice medicine. And so I always come to these questions with a bit of an analytical lens because one thing that immediately comes to mind is that this is sounding a lot like depression. Why? Because you can compare this to a time beforehand where you were motivated and surrounded by people and connected to people, and all of a sudden that is going away. And one of the prime symptom of depression is something called anhedonia. It's when you start losing your the experience of joy. You don't feel joy. Things don't bring you joy anymore. Things that you used to enjoy doing no longer bring you that joy. That's a telltale sign of depression. And a lot of people think that depression just dips serotonin, right? You might have heard about the neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in our brain, serotonin. It's really important for us to feel happy and joyful. But another really important molecule that is affected by depression is dopamine. Dopamine is our pleasure molecule, but even more important than that, it is the molecule of motivation. So when you have depression and your dopamine drops, motivation follows. And what is the sister saying? I have lost motivation. I've lost motivation. I'm procrastinating. I've lost motivation to do things I used to do. I don't want to be around people anymore. I'm even when it comes to my Salah, I'm procrastinating. Why is this important? Why does it matter that this woman now knows that the underlying issue sounds a lot like depression? Obviously, she's not my patient for me to diagnose her, but I'm just sharing what the language is pointing to. Because this is a principle of self-improvement. If you don't know the problem, how are you going to actually take the proper steps? If you don't know the direction that you're supposed to be moving in, how do you know where to start walking? Right? So sis, you don't have a procrastination problem. You don't have a motivation problem. You have a depression problem. And that means it's time to start investigating where's that coming from. I have a video on my YouTube channel that analyzes depression in a very different way than most people talk about it. It's an older video, but it talks about the 7 types of depression because the reality is what underlies depression is different for different people. Example, if something really tragic and hard happened to you recently, you lost someone that you love, it might be that depression comes as a result of that. For some people, it's a short time, it's the grieving period, and then it goes away, right? And it comes back in waves, but essentially they're still able to function. For others, it continues. Now, there are other people who depression can happen for other reasons, right? And one reason we often don't think about is because we burn out our dopamine. So this sister mentioned, and because she's lacking this motivation and she's procrastinating, she's finding herself. Let me see where she words it. Give me one moment to see exactly how she words it. Let me see. Where she essentially mentioned that she finds herself on her phone a lot. Where did you write that? I used to. Yeah, she's finding that she's only feeling good when she's sitting by herself, spending time on useless things like social media. What is going on there? Okay, depression is happening. It dips your motivation because it's affecting your dopamine levels. What does social media do? Social media is a dopamine hit machine. It is basically engineered in a way that it gives us little spikes of dopamine. So your dopamine is so lacking in other places that you are craving it. And this is how people end up with social media addictions, right? You find yourself not being able to put your phone down. You find hours pass when you're on your phone. It's because it's engineered that way to give you those dopamine hits, make you feel good, attach you to this action, and you keep doing it, right? Because we enjoy the feeling of feeling good. But the thing about depression specifically, there's this thing called stress generation, and it's basically one of the pillars of what sustains depression. How does depression continue, right? Stress generation is basically where we do things that we know are not going to help our depression, and we don't do the things that are going to help our depression. It sounds super simple, but if you've ever been depressed, you know how complex this is, right? Because when you're depressed, your motivation is not there. It's very hard for you to feel motivated to eat well, to go outside, to be social, to connect with people, to exercise, to do the things that you know are going to help with depression. From a faith point of view, people find oftentimes that with depression, their faith gets affected, and they're not praying, they're not as focused in Salah, or maybe they stop praying altogether. Dua is not something that they're commonly doing. That's a whole other subject on its own. But when you have depression, you have to separate this point of I don't feel motivated and realize that even if you don't experience a sense of motivation, and it's a very hard feeling to experience as someone who had struggled with depression for a very long time. I completely understand what that feels like and what goes on through your head. But what makes the difference between people who live in depression for the rest of their lives and those who are able to free themselves from it with the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is you do the things you know are going to help, and you do it even if it's against your lack of motivation, because you might not have motivation but you still have all the energy in your body to get you up and do those things, right? So to my sister and to anyone who's dealing with depression, it sounds simple, but I'm going to break it down for you very simply, and I have videos on this on my channel. If you just look up different videos on depression or go through kind of to earlier videos, I talk about this. Select 3 things every single day that you are going to do that you know are going to help your depression. Don't give yourself excuses, just get up and do them. And again, remember that at the end of the day, the depression is affecting the wiring of our brain to a certain extent, and we can also affect the wiring of our brain, right? Our brain is constantly creating new patterns and new wiring, and we either strengthen them or weaken them. So if we continue as we are with the same thought patterns and the same behaviors as the depressed version of us, basically, that gets strengthened. But if we decide, okay, I know I don't feel motivated, I feel very sad, nothing is bringing me joy, but I'm going to do what I know is going to help anyways. I'm going to get the proper knowledge, I'm going to execute. Then we're strengthening new connections that are going to help boost those levels of serotonin and dopamine. And obviously, for anyone who is dealing with this, there are mental health professionals who are able to support you in this. If you ever want to consider their supplements or medications that can help as well, please discuss with your medical provider. And of course, as a warning, you can always find this I believe in the description of this video. But if you're finding that you're having thoughts of harming yourself to any extent, please contact the local mental health emergency resources in your community, and please don't neglect that. So those are a few things that I want to say to that. Now let's talk about the sister's struggle with Salah, because I literally just got a comment about this yesterday. Sis, can you make a video about struggling with Iman? Now here's the thing, I feel like sometimes, and maybe I go about this a little harsher than others, I have a whole video on if you're struggling with Salah. You can find that on my channel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim. He's the all-knowing. He knows what he's doing, right? So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a fard or an obligation such as Salah and mandated 5 times a day for every single person, no matter what, with very, very minor exceptions. The minor exception, a woman who is on her menses or postpartum bleeding, you're in a coma, right? SubhanAllah. You, for people who are like clinically either severely mentally disabled and can't, the pen is lifted for them. They don't even get sins written down because they don't have the mental faculties to be able to tell right from wrong. Very few exceptions are present for Salah. In fact, if you are in the middle of a desert and there's absolutely no water for you to make wudu, you're still not excused from Salah. So what I need, and I think a lot of us need this. There is a place for compassion, but when it comes to the rights that we fulfill of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's Allah's right that we worship Him in the way that He asks us to be worshipped, and He gives us very few mandatory requirements, if you really think about it. I think we need to be a little harsher on ourselves in a sense. And why do I say that? There's a reality of the world that we live in. It is temporary, it is a dunya, and we are going to be asked about it. And I find often, and even when, again, one-on-one clients that I work with, when we're working on this iman side of things, what usually is happening is I work, with sisters who are extremely depressed, for example, and yet they still pray. And then I work with others who are struggling with Salah altogether. And the question is, what's the difference between these two? They might be experiencing the same exact symptoms, same exact environmental influences in terms of what their upbringing is like, what their family is like, right? All things can be the same, but one is committed to her Salah and the other is not. It's pretty simple. One has made Salah a non-negotiable. She has made the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a non-negotiable. Because she understands Allah mandated this. It doesn't matter where I am mentally. It is a requirement, right? There's never going to be a time where that requirement lifts. And in fact, there is a very important connection between the state of our soul and the state of our mind, right? And there used to be it used to be something that when we were first introducing mental health concepts to the community, because there was so much stigma, people used to say something like, Iman and mental health have nothing to do with each other. Now, they meant well, but that's not true. It's certainly not true. If you find that your Iman is wavering, it is going to impact your mental health, and vice versa. Now, that's not to say that simply because someone is depressed, their Iman is lower. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that they do have an influence on each other. And when we neglect Salah and we're neglecting a right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it impacts our soul, it impacts our ruh. And a result, an extension of that, is it also is going to impact our mental well-being, right? I want you guys to think about this way, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that in the way, if you are doing what you're supposed to be doing as a Muslim, ideally you are in the process of purifying your heart. And when we are doing sins and we don't repent from them and we are, disconnecting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our spiritual heart gets blackened, right? It becomes hard. There's a harshness to the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this. Now, for someone with a more or less purified heart, when they sin, what happens? They start to feel, they feel guilty, they feel sad, they feel icky, they feel confused. Those emotions that you're feeling, where does that come from? Here. So isn't it crazy how, subhanAllah, again, the impact on the ruh, on or her is essentially like the seat of our soul, if you could describe it that way. They connect to each other. So anyone who's struggling with depression and finding themselves struggling with Salah, it's a matter of priority. Because I can guarantee you one thing. If someone could come to you and tell you, I'll give myself let me see, who do we have here? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you guys so much for your comments. And again, if you are watching this live, comment assalam and let me know where you are watching from. We have like 15 people watching live, so please let me know, inshallah, where you're watching from. Don't be shy. Someone came to me and said, Hannah, you are going to die in 24 hours. And they were telling the truth. If I never prayed a single salah in my life, what am I going to do that day? I'm going to spend that entire day, more likely, praying, asking Allah for forgiveness in fear. Now, isn't that curious? Because none of us know when we are going to die. If any one of us, no matter the age, the next day could be our last, or this day could be our last. So do you guys understand what I'm saying when I say this is a matter of prioritizing? It's a matter of treating Salah as a non-negotiable and not letting your emotions be the thing that decides whether or not you pray. Because Salah was not, it's nice, it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Salah makes us feel good. It's a mercy. But that we don't worship our feelings, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even if we don't feel good, it is we still stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving him his rights. And in fact, I say this a lot in your healing journey. How beautiful is it going to be when you get to the end and inshallah, whatever is burdening you or depressing you is no longer a part of your life. You have done the work to heal, alhamdulillah, Allah has relieved you from that burden. And you get to stand in front of Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah and say, Ya Allah, even when I was in my lowest of the low, I never neglected your worship. Your reward is greater. Your standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater. I want you guys to remember this, because when we speak a lot about hardship in theory, but we don't understand that every time we're going through hardship in our lives, our reaction to that is being written down. It is literally being documented, and it is affecting our ranking with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to my sister who's struggling with this, to my sisters and brothers who are watching this, who also might find, yeah, Hannah, I do kind of neglect my worship when I'm going through a hard time. Remember that. Take that, shift your mindset and think it's no longer going to be about I feel like doing this or not. It's going to be about how do I want to look in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this moment of hardship. I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see me. This is something I used to tell myself. I went through a good 20 years of depression of my life. It was really, really hard, but I remember I never skipped a salah. I never missed a salah. I very rarely did I delay a salah. And if it was delayed, it was not because I intentionally delayed it. It's because I truly completely forgot. And we're not punished for what we forget. You know, as long as we get up immediately and we pray. So I never, it's to the extent that I never delayed to the extent of the haram. And I kept telling myself, I want Allah to see me when this is over and done with, because I know even if it's been 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I know that Allah promises, inna ma'al usri yusra, indeed with hardship comes ease. When that ease comes, I want to be able to be proud of myself for what I was doing, because I know if I can build the strength and resilience in hardship, imagine when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me ease, what I'm going to be able to do as his worshiper, right? So all that to say, my love, who submitted this question, investigate the reasons possible for depression. I have videos on this. You can look into it. Start investigating resources. Learn the principle of stress generation. Do the things that you know are going to help. Stop doing the things that you know are going to hurt. Learn how to push past the lack of motivation and the sadness. Work with professionals if you need to, and if that serves your journey best, who can help you. Because when we're depressed, we have a fog in front of what we can see. Someone who is trained can help us see past that fog and build and call us out as well. I do one-on-one coaching as well, by the way. I'll throw that out there. If you want to work with me right now, I'm mainly working with women, but for brothers who are watching this who want one-on-one coaching for just life coaching in general, I do have a brother who inshallah I can recommend to you. Just again, you want to submit the form in the description of this video. And for my sisters who are specifically experiencing trauma, I have a trauma group coaching program. The application is open, alhamdulillah. We're already filling out spots for that. So if you are interested in that, then please go to the link in my description. I also have a webinar on healing trauma that you can watch as well. So let me see if there's anything else that I need to add for this sister. To my sister mentioned here, I have prayed tahajjud several times for this. I'm assuming for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free her from difficulty. And again, I'm going to challenge you on that, because it's interesting. We'll do this thing where we go above and beyond with the extra acts of worship. Tahajjud is not mandatory. The scholars remind us it is more and more that you fulfill the obligation than do things that are nawafil or extra, because the nawafil, what they do is they fill gaps in the mandatory that were created, that were required. They do not replace them. So the Prophet ﷺ actually tells us in a hadith that the sunnah prayers that we pray, like the extra prayers, the two before, the two after maghrib, the two before fajr, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when we present our obligatory salah, fajr, dhuhr, asr, so on, and inevitably there are going to be gaps in them. We lose our khushu', we lose our train of thought. Sometimes it just, maybe we waited a little too long before praying. Those nawafil prayers fill the gaps. But what happens when the gaps are the fard salah, the required salah? No amount of nawafil is going to fill that. So we have to be very, very careful with that. Now, moving on, she mentions sihr, evil eye. And I had to talk about this. I had to talk about this because you know what we do, to my lovely brothers and sisters who are watching this? We use evil eye as a crutch very often. Now, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the evil eye is haqq, it is true. Scholars actually disagree on what he actually meant by evil eye. Right. So you guys can look into that literature on its own. I'm not going to talk too much about it because people get very passionate about this, but there is a scholarly disagreement on what that actually means. Is it what we typically think of, where it's like someone who's jealous can, just by virtue of them being jealous, it sends us negative, impacts to our life by that? Or other scholars say, no, it's the fact that if someone's envious and they may do something to harm you, that's what evil eye is referencing. There's a hadith in terms of the first one, but then other scholars debate the authenticity of the hadith altogether. Again, people get super passionate about it, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Do your own research and come to your own conclusion based on the scholars that you trust, inshallah. But the point being is that regardless of what it is, evil eye is true. But we also have a beautiful capacity of free will, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us things to protect us from the evil eye. So we know certain surahs in the Quran, right, that are protection, the three quls, right? قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, like we are seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ayatul Kursi. There are specific du'as that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to protect us from evil eye. Why am I mentioning this? I'm not mentioning this so that you guys know how to protect yourself from the evil eye, though it is important, but rather to realize that even in the face of rain, we still have autonomy and power, and we should take the necessary precautions, but we shouldn't use it as a crutch. And when something is removing us from an obligation, that's not evil eye. Evil eye doesn't have that power. Again, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made something mandatory, no amount of rain is going to stop us from doing that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be held accountable. We have to start taking more accountability when it comes to it. We treat evil eye like information. If I suspect that this might be the possibility, then I'm going to do what I need to do to say the du'as and recite the surahs that are protective of me. And I'm going to also take the actions that are going to help better my life. Because again, as someone, hang on, let me see. Let me address this comment in a quick second, inshallah. So, where was I? Yeah. So basically, we still have autonomy in the lives, in the way that we choose to live our lives. And so, as a medical professional, when I hear things like, "Oh, my hair is falling out," and this isn't happening, some might attribute it to evil eye, but then there are about 100 other reasons medically that your hair could be falling out. Iron deficiency, thyroid issues, stress, chronic depression can affect it. Just sometimes genetically this happens. Some people just lose a certain amount of hair by a certain age, men and women. And I'm not talking about balding, I'm talking about thinning. So again, we have to be really mindful. Someone said, toxic boyfriends, why are you normalizing such a lifestyle? To my friend who's commenting this, we haven't gotten to the question. It's not being normalized. In fact, I if you were here in the beginning, I specifically mentioned that this is a haram relationship. So it is important to, make sure that you watch the entire thing if you are confused on something. No woman should arrange the marriage of another woman, and no woman should arrange her own marriage. The adulteress is the one who arranges her own marriage. Okay. Anyways, I'm not going to touch too much on that. Inshallah, once we get to that question, we can address the things that are there. Also, that hadith has different interpretations because different schools of thought specifically mention what is allowed in terms of that. And you need to remember that Khadija radiallahu anhu was the one who decided that she wanted to marry Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam within the Islamic parameters. So with that being said, you guys, let's jump into the next question. But before that, there are some people who gave salam that we want to return our salam to. Wa alaikum assalam, Windstorm. Wa alaikum assalam from India. Salam from Canada. Wa alaikum assalam from Andalusia suburbs. What is that? What's Andalusia suburbs? Is that Spain? Wa alaikum assalam from Seattle, Washington. Wa alaikum assalam from Seattle as well. yourself, let alone normalize adultery by giving it names like boyfriend. I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to mute you now because I don't think you're reading what I'm saying. Okay, moving forward. Let's go to our next question. Inshallah. Saraya from Maryland, welcome, welcome. We're going to move on to our next question. This is Amina from Bangladesh. Dear Hannah, 2 years ago, I got in a relationship with a senior from my college. At first, I was hesitant as I had always been reserved around males, but he seemed different from the typical men. He approached through a friend who told me he has an image of someone who is really fun and respects women. He lacked some traits I would generally look for in marriage, as he was not religious at all, but I was not thinking about that in the beginning. That's red flag number one. Please, any men or women that are watching this, right? At the end of the day, when you are investigating and you have the options in front of you of the types of people you want to marry, and an option is put in front of you, please make sure you know what you're looking for, and do not, if the thought comes, oh, they don't have traits that I want in a spouse, and one of those traits is specifically deen, run the other direction, because anything going beyond that is going to be extremely, extremely harmful. We had similar hobbies and really connected in ways of our humor and political views, etc. Next thing I knew, he was getting really comfortable with telling me the most private things about him. I was someone really naive and struggled making boundaries. I had no intention of getting into a relationship. It escalated very quickly. He was very close to his mother and told her about me in just 1 week of knowing me, and soon told me he loved me. I had a bad gut feeling about because of how soon it was. Red flag number 2 and 3, someone who moves too quickly and someone who says I love you before they're married to you. A month later, I started developing feelings too, and decided to make him meet someone in my family whose opinion of him I could trust. He met my brother, but my parents had no idea, as they're really strict. I wanted to be sure about him because before involving families, everything was going well until I started noticing some of his habits that really bothered me. Okay. Having lots of female friends, bad company, and lacking modesty. Red flag number 4, 5, and 6. This guy's collecting them at this point. I brought it to his notice that I imagined myself with someone who is more spiritual, and his bringing up in his upbringing was very different. When I expressed my concerns, he suddenly started making efforts to change, praying regularly, going to the mosque, and telling me that it's for his own good. I thought he genuinely has a love for me, and I started to feel a lot better, but one thing which still bothered me was that I remembered he told me in the very beginning that he watches adult entertainment. Since about a decade at 14, it's something he is trying to quit. I didn't pay much attention to this as I didn't know how bad this habit was. Soon I started feeling guilty because those things were in the past, and wondered if he was really changing and truly loved me. And it felt like he was faking his personality to get me in the start, but he never actively ever lied to me. I disagree with that. I think he lied to you by presenting himself as something that he's not. He might not have said something verbally to you that was a lie, but he was essentially taking on the persona that someone else had promoted him as, when he wasn't those things. He, despite of me barging in on his texts and exposing his sin, where are we at? He, despite of me barging in on his sex and exposing his sin to the girl who I only told with an intention of protecting her and to seek advice from her, forgave me, and we decided to give it another chance a few months later. But he never admitted he was pretentious to me or faked anything. I prayed dua of istikhara a few days and started talking again, but it didn't feel like he had made any changes. He had moved to a different country, but still was in contact with old friends. I asked him to cut off. Oh, okay. So, sorry guys, I just realized there was something in here that actually was not specifically mentioned. I might have removed it by accident when I was creating this. Let me see. I think I removed it, but basically she had mentioned that she found that this guy and one of his close friends would speak very inappropriately of one girl that she knew, who I believe was also her friend, and like speak about her body and things of that sort. And she found the text where that was speaking about it. He had moved to a different country, but still was in contact with the old friends. I asked him to cut off ties with a friend with whom he would chat immodestly, the one that I just mentioned. He defended him by saying it's in the past and they both have matured. When I asked him about his habit of watching adult entertainment, he told me that he is 3 months clean and won't go back to it. I was distressed because I was scared he will not get rid of this habit. He was really respectful and caring towards me. His family dynamics and future goals really aligned with mine, and we were both looking forward to making things halal. This is where we entered a bit of the delulu stage. His family dynamics might be normal. His future goals, because goals are a reflection of values, probably weren't as aligned. Respectful and caring towards me, I guess we can debate what does it mean to be respectful and caring. If one person is interested in another person for marriage, but they're continuing with all of these sins, they're not trying being friends with the men who objectify women really icked me, as it should, sis. I realized he in fact hadn't changed. His actions didn't meet his words sometimes. I was conflicted about whether he was truly changing or only pretending to woo me. You guys who are watching this live, drop your thoughts in the live chat, inshallah. Respectfully, too, because the sister is going to be watching them, and I want, obviously, we care about her very deeply. And I know there are both brothers and sisters who are watching this live, and I'm sure would have very helpful things to say. And I realized he, in fact, hadn't changed. I realized it from the very beginning that you started the question, my love. His actions didn't meet his words. Sometimes, very often, I was conflicted about whether he was truly changing or only pretending to woo me. I know I cannot change anyone. He still lacked taqwa and piousness, which I craved in a partner. You need in a partner. Everyone needs taqwa in a partner. You will be in disaster otherwise. And even if they're the most incredible partner in the dunya, why would you want to be married to someone? Because you hope that inshallah this results in marriage. When we are in the situation as haram as it might be, the hope is that it ends up in marriage. Sorry guys if you can hear beeping in the background. There's just some trucks moving around. But why would you want to be married to someone who might be good to you in the dunya, but their akhirah, they're risking it, and you might not spend the akhirah together? I knew I deserved better, and so I ended things. Fast forward to 6 months ago, after 8 months of no contact, really self-reflecting and making tawbah, alhamdulillah, as a very good strategy. I contacted randomly to know his whereabouts as he had cut off social media. This gave me hope that this time he really has done sincere tawbah, stopped watching things he shouldn't be watching, and we can start talking again, but within religious boundaries. I wanted to leave my country and live abroad with him, but by this time he had opted a hot and cold behavior with me. Sometimes he showed me a lot of interest, other times I felt clingy. All of this is extremely immature, and I never wanted to be in this position. So after being in a gray area for 5 months, I told him to finally make a decision. He made his decision a long time ago, my love. I was making tahajjud that if this is not good for me, it is taken away from me. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad, again, you consulted Allah in this. When we get ourselves in really sticky situations where a lot of haram is being done, we have to make sure we're turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he told me that he needs to focus on his career and now ended things for good. Now, as I reflect on the past, I find myself torn between regret and acceptance. I still sometimes regret I lost someone who was really improving and blame myself for ruining things when they were healthy. Yeah, I acknowledge that there might be more hidden things, and Allah protected me since the very start. Despite knowing the relationship was not halal and my intuition having doubts in start, I found it difficult to let go. I recognize that that whole relationship was built on the premise of changing him to fit my ideal partner, but I also searched search for his good qualities and things we connected on. And I also search for good qualities and things we connected on in everyone I meet. I need hope that Allah will replace us with something better. But I find myself really anxious about my future because I fear that my parents will soon get me married to someone I barely know. I've worked up on myself a lot, realized my mistakes, and know that that I know what I want in a spouse. I wish I could hear some advice from you as to what I should do now and get closure about past decisions. I want to learn to have more tawakkul in Allah. I just posted a video on tawakkul, by the way, for all of those. And sorry this is really long, but please help me through it. May Allah bless you and Ameen. SubhanAllah, by the way, you guys, the actual question was longer. But I just kind of minimized some details so that when I presented it to you all, it wasn't as extensive. So let's talk about this, inshallah. A lot to be said. Let me hear what you guys have to say. Let me stop her. Oh, I was hoping to come back to some comments. So let me hear what you guys have to say, inshallah, in the live chat. By the way, Andalusia suburbs is Europe. And salam from NYC. Wa alaikum assalam. So lots of things to be said about this. And I laugh a little only because it is such a common situation I come across. And, you know, we'll get into these situations where it's like, you know, the red flags are right in front of you, but excuses are being made. And so there are a few things that we want to point out here. And now that you are at the latter end of this, you look back and you need to be able to evaluate what happened, why did it happen, what do I do to make sure it never happens again? Because first and foremost, right, there's this element of anytime we introduce something into our lives that is disappointing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is sinful, that is disappointing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the barakah is taken away from it. And so from the get-go and the way things kind of start off, and again, it can get complicated, but barakah gets taken away, then you end up with this whole mess of things, and just kind of like what we saw in the situation. I say this with the utmost level of empathy, but just kind of evaluating. So now, inshallah, moving into the future, you kind of know, okay, let me make sure that things have the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the very beginning. So here are some things that I kind of took note of to share. And for anyone watching this, man or woman, I want you to take note of in the marriage process, are you doing the same? Because the marriage process is very anxiety inducing for a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who, you know, will take things into their own hands. And there's an element of where you can't take certain things into your own hands that are in line with deen. You're allowed to decide who it is that you want to you know, who you want to marry. Obviously, you're allowed to point them in the direction of your wali if you are a woman, or if you are a brother, having someone that you know speak to that person. You're allowed to ask the questions that you need to ask to make sure that you know who this person is, the values that they have, what their goals are, what roles they believe that they should be adopting as a husband or wife. In fact, I'm creating a whole ebook on this, the top questions that you should be asking someone, inshallah. But the problem number one is you negotiated your must-haves. When you are looking into a potential to marry, you need to come to it not looking at that person, but already having a list of your must-haves. What are the things you will never negotiate? If you do not know what your must-haves are, then you become it is a blank page, and you will fill things out, because once your desire kicks in and shaitan takes advantage of it, everything can become a possibility. This person becomes a work in progress in your eyes, and like a project you're working on. What are your must-haves? You guys, each and every single one of you who's watching this, I want you, after this video is done, right, this is homework, I want you to figure out what your 5 non-negotiable must-haves are. If you're a Muslim, one of your top must-haves should be taqwa, someone who has religiosity, someone who actually takes their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seriously. That is going to take care of so many issues. And someone who's married, I'm telling you, when you are married to someone who, mashallah, tabarakallah, Allah's rules, the way they operate, it makes things so much easier. So much easier, alhamdulillah. Number 2 is, it is very clear that there's a scarcity mindset. And I actually have a video coming out about scarcity versus abundance mindset. It should be coming out either sometime this upcoming weekend. Scarcity mindset, and I say that because you said at the end, after all of this craziness, and I'm sure it was very emotionally draining for you, you're afraid that Allah isn't going to replace what you lost. You're afraid that it's not going to end up going well for you. And here's the thing, when we truly believe that, like that's our true fear, we self-sabotage. We don't make dua for things. We don't put in an effort to shift the possible results. And things do, it becomes a confirmation bias. Things do end up not going too well in a lot of cases, right? Unless Allah protects us from that. But we have autonomy. We are human beings. We have free will. Shift your mindset. Don't go to scarcity mindset. Go to abundance mindset. Go to Allah wants me to be a dignified Muslim woman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to get married and He wants us to have healthy marriages. There still exist, whether people believe it or not, Muslim men and Muslim women who are good people, who will be good husbands and good wives and good mothers and good fathers, right? And you make dua for them sincerely, and you make dua knowing from deep within your heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Qadir, capable of all things. Do you think it is hard for Him to bring you a spouse who is a good person? Worry about if you're also a good person, do the self-improvement to make sure you're a good person who's deserving of that, and who can actually uphold the responsibility that comes with it. But don't limit yourself to the beautiful, beautiful blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just because you have fear. We all have fear of certain things, but allow our hope to overcome that fear, okay? And be mindful of making dua and start thinking, what can I do? And I know there are a lot of people, marriage, has a certain level of destiny associated with it, but dua changes destiny. So keep working on yourself, keep doing what you need to do, keep making dua, and start thinking about the kind of person that you want. Again, what you can do to make sure this doesn't happen. Problem number 3, and it was half jokingly, but mentioned this when we were first starting. He was showing you who he is, and you did not believe him. I mean, as I'm seeing this, it's people, sometimes we play a game when we want to keep someone. And in this case, he might have been playing a game to keep you around, right? When a man, I'm going to tell you this, for the woman watching this, when a man is serious, he knows he's serious. So if he's not yet ready to get married, he won't drag you along. He won't drag you along, okay? He will go to the wali, he will make arrangements, or he will let you know, okay, I will be ready in this amount of time, and he will work hard to make that happen. Or if he's already ready, he's not going to play around. He's going to go for the kill, right? That's what a serious man does. You don't want little boys, you want men. So he clearly was not serious in the beginning. And he was showing you that, and he was showing you he's not ready to be a good, husband in terms of like taqwa. And there were certain addictions, essentially. This was an addiction that he's experiencing that he still had not yet overcome. There's a certain religious level of knowledge that he still hadn't attained. Now, I'm not saying that he won't become an incredible person, but he just wasn't yet doing that. And he waited, held on to hope because he started doing it. But when we have those must-haves in front of us, we don't negotiate our worth by, giving a chance to someone who isn't where we need them to be. You don't look at a spouse as, oh, they have potential. You need to look at them like, this is a person. If I was going to marry this person and this is how they stayed forever, would I be okay with that? Because no, you can't change a person. They have to decide for themselves that they want to change. So next is that, there's a level of enmeshment. And for those of you guys who don't know what enmeshment is, it's a bit of a trauma bond that happens when you guys get into such a deep connection in relationship that you can't separate yourself from that person identity wise. And so that becomes really hard because now you start compromising your values. You start compromising what you believe in. You start giving chances when you shouldn't be giving chances, when you know it's not going to end well. And you end up in the situation where you're doing things that you never would have imagined beforehand because you started on unsteady ground. Next issue, and this is for any man or woman, you should never have to feel like you're playing the parent in your relationship. You're not his mom. You're not her dad. If you feel like you need to tell them to go pray and go do this and make sure you're doing this so you can be healthy and make sure you're practicing like this, you've entered into a parenting role. Nobody is going to succeed in a marriage with their mother or father. I say that metaphorically. You are marrying someone who is a whole human being and what they are at that moment, right? So as soon as you start finding yourself in that situation, it throws off the dynamic of masculinity and femininity. Men do not want to be treated like they are a child. Neither do women, but in the sense of the way Islam has basically set up the family system, if that man is going to be the shepherd of your family, right? The Prophet ﷺ tells us that every person is a shepherd, and they will be asked on the day of judgment about their flock. And the man or the husband is the shepherd of his family. That's going to be the one shepherding your family. Do you trust that person to lead the family as you are? And for my brothers, you think about that. You think about that for yourselves, right? Am I in a place where I can lead my family? And we have so many conversations about like masculinity, femininity. Well, what if I want to, I want to lead in a family, but she doesn't want to follow. There comes a time when you bring taqwa into the equation, when people are truly God conscious, things fall into place, because a woman then understands in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, here is what my strengths are, and here is how I'm going to operate in a family that is pleasing to Allah. And a man understands, and I have taqwa, I have God consciousness in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, here's how I can be a good husband and a good father, and here's what I'm going to do. And we strip away ego, right? And we throw away like unhealthy desire. And we focus on us as a unit instead of solely us as individuals. So that's something we often overlook. And young girls, especially younger, like when I say younger, like early 20s, mid 20s, overlook this a lot. You'll find them like interested in men who you feel like you have to wag your finger, and then you're shaming him and like demeaning him and emasculating him, and you think that's going to lend itself to a healthy future marriage, and he's not even serious. He's not. We got to learn as women to protect our dignity to a high level, and say if he's not serious, then I'll leave it to Allah. Why are we blocking? It might be that we're even blocking our true husband from coming, because we're so fixated on someone who's a project for us, and we've become so attached to that person. And the last thing is your self-worth. It gets damaged in these instances. And usually, and I say this with so much love for anyone watching this, usually when we are accepting people who have high self-esteem, high self-worth, and also grew up in like healthy family systems, they usually don't even compromise the values in the beginning. Like you don't really have a shot with those people if you're not a with those types of Muslims, if you're not a God conscious person, because they know the worth and they know what they're looking for, and they have parents as an example who show what that looks like, and so they have the framework. Now a lot of us didn't get that. In fact, I would say that maybe majority of us didn't get that. That's okay. That just means that we have some work to do on our self-worth and our dignity, and us knowing what we want, so we have that as the rubric, right? And when you set those lines up before ever meeting someone, then you now have the barriers to protect you. And especially for women, we have to be very mindful, because this might have ended in a certain way where he wants to focus on work. And by the way, I just want to say, usually when men say that after like being back and forth, messing around in a haram relationship, it's not really because of work. It's because they got tired of it and they weren't serious in the beginning. Please, if he comes back, I would say like learn to create some detachment. I usually don't give advice, but just having seen so many sisters in the situation, and it always ended up not work. It always ended up disastrous, and they tended to come back and forth. It becomes a very toxic dynamic. And again, your heart cannot be attached to your future husband and like open to the future husband if it's attached to someone who isn't going to be a husband. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of work that has to be done. Now we have a lot of comments on here that I would absolutely love to get a sense. So when Storm says, very important, green red flags, it's easy to get lost in emotions, anticipations, and expectations. Putting Allah first before everything makes it all clear to know what to do and feel alhamdulillah. Agreed. And you know what, even in the sense of people who are very God conscious, emotions are still going to come up, right? But when we have a framework for how to operate, and I used to do premarital coaching as well. So this is kind of where the system comes out. And I've been getting a lot of questions about, Hannah, do you have a course on this? Do you have worksheets on this? Do you da da da? I'm in the process of making them. I do have some videos on marriage already on my channel if you guys want to look into those. But when they're out, you guys will be the first to know, inshallah. But yeah, those emotions are going to be there. A beautiful reference to one of the verses of the Quran. O children of Adam, we have bestowed upon you clothing to conceal your private parts and as adornment, but the clothing of righteousness, that is the best. Oh, if you want to destroy any nation without war, make adultery or nudity common in the young generation. That's from Salah ad-Din. That's a very, very, it's relevant in the sense, and there's no one's accusing anyone of this, but oftentimes in a lot of these relationships, it becomes, the Quran tells us to not even come near zina, and those things are coming near it, because for a lot of people, it does end up like that. So interesting insights here. He was wrong for doing such acts and behavior. He didn't value her as a woman. I didn't look at random women and like it. If I did such a thing, I would be degrading my future wife. So never do I randomly look at women, nor will I do such a thing. And I agree with that. I think that, I mean, in the process of specifically, that should have been a point where you just cut off when a man who is addicted to the visual consumption of women. And I'm not just talking about the stuff he was watching, but the fact that he was speaking about one of your friends or one of the girls in your lives with such crassness and such lack of hayat. Men like that that doesn't just switch off after marriage. It doesn't just switch off after marriage. It continues. And I have so many examples of women who found themselves in that situation, married to men like that. Some of them knew, some of them didn't know, right? Some of them thought he'd get better and ended up in divorce because it doesn't, right? Again, that work has to be done on the side of the man. Someone said, Alhamdulillah, a huge reason I converted to Islam is the focus for men and women to focus on developing their masculinity and femininity, becoming the best person they can before marriage. Most important thing to a man is modesty. Without such a way, men become worthless by the second, and marriage men must never be pitied. Very cool. Thank you guys so much for sharing. In the USA, there's a dating culture of going through endless relationships to find the right one, but hardly any focus on becoming the best person you can be and becoming the right person. I agree with that 100%. And it's to the detriment of society and the person, because now you're creating you attach to someone, the attachment ruptures. You attach to someone, attachment ruptures. It is literally affecting your brain. And we wonder why there's such a high divorce rate and why people are finding themselves in such dissatisfaction in their relationships in the US and other Western cultures, because we made relationships such a we've commodified it, right? It's not something sacred anymore. It's not something that you take necessary precautions anymore. It's not something that you see as doing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you start holding yourself accountable and realizing that if I wrong my husband or my wife, then I'm going to be held accountable for it in front of Allah, right? And that helps keep us on the straight and narrow. Hello, I just got a notification for this video and I believe it's a sign from Allah. My exams are coming up. Please pray for me, guys. I'm really nervous. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. Bless you with passing your exams with flying colors. Inshallah, you can also watch it from the very beginning. Alhamdulillah, this month my wife and I have been married for 21 years, and you have to share, inshallah, with us some tips and advice of how to keep, if you would qualify your marriage as a marriage you want other people to mimic, how to keep a healthy marriage, inshallah. Alrighty. So that's what I have to say to my sister in that situation. Let me just see if there's anything that I missed. Yeah, keep the when someone shows you who you are in the beginning, believe them. If you're finding all these red flags, as soon as you got that inkling, because our nafs will tell us, you'll start to feel really anxious and like, I don't feel like this is the right decision. Listen to that. It's usually pretty dead on. Okay. we're going to go to the final question, inshallah, for today. And this is from Rayan in Singapore. Dear Hannah, there's a certain Catholic girl whom I'm very fond of. You're getting yourself into such interesting situations. For Ramadan, I had decided that I was going to cut her off, but still make plenty of dua for her to be guided onto the straight path of Islam, so that her and her family convert to Islam. However, at what point should I stop making dua for her? Do I just never stop making dua for her guidance? Should I stop after I've made dua at the Multazim during my Umrah this year? Do I stop making dua after I have woken up for Tahajjud this Ramadan? So this was submitted before Ramadan, by the way. Or should I never stop making dua for this girl? It is a bit hard to gauge whether she will be rightly guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since I have fully cut her off in texting her after Ramadan. It just makes me feel like a hypocrite. Help me, big sis. Your videos are amazing. Keep up the good work. You guys are cute, the ones who call me big sis. Bismillah. So, this is a really interesting question, right? When do we stop making dua? So, I can't speak on it from a scholarly aspect, like what would scholars say when you stop making dua. Just something that we would like to remember is, first of all, dua, you can make dua as often as you want, for as much as you want. And making dua for someone's hidayah, someone's guidance is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for that. And Ameen to your duas. May Allah guide her and her family, because that's, you're caring about their dunya and the akhirah. There comes a point where we also have to ask, like, what's our intention behind the dua? And when we continue to make dua for something, it also maintains a desire for that in the heart. So I can't tell you, like, stop making dua or continue making dua, but I'd rather ask you is, what are you hoping for the dua to achieve? If it's just out of sincerity that you want her to become Muslim, then I wouldn't ever stop making that dua. It's such a beautiful dua. Is it because you want to wife her up in the future? Then that's a whole other question, right? But we also have to remind ourselves that dua is answered in 3 different ways, right? One way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually gives us what we asked for. The second way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes a calamity, this is from the hadith, by the way, removes the calamity from our path. Something that would have struck us, that would have, hurt us in our life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blocks it from us. He shifts destiny. And the last one is that we get the reward of our dua on the Day of Judgment. And there's another hadith where it is described that those of us who see the reward of our unanswered duas on the Day of Judgment, we are going to be so happy. And we are going to say, I wish I never had any one of my duas answered. There's also a reminder that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ, when he would make dua for some of the mushrikeen to become Muslim, that he could make dua for them. God knows how many times over. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still would not answer that dua, that he can make istighfar for them. He could ask for their forgiveness, and Allah won't give it. At the end of the day, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's going to determine the result. So I would say question your intention behind it. And if it is still something that is in your heart and you can go about it in a halal way, keep making the dua. But be honest with yourself about it. Okay. Let's see some other thoughts we have. One word of advice, always keep the lines of communication open and never go to bed angry with your spouse. Yeah, that's a common one. I'm curious to know, actually, is there anyone who disagrees with this advice? Because I remember once I was in a workshop, and the counselor, I believe she was a counselor, had mentioned that there are some who this is a really great operational method for them, and there are others who actually might need to go to sleep so that they wake up with a fresh mind and deal with the issue. So I'm curious to know if anyone has any other thoughts. Someone says, I was involved with people who thought it was funny to speak about women's body parts with vulgarity. I didn't have strong boundaries back then, but now in my mid-20s, I see that I should have believed them when they showed me who they were. I agree. And we have these are some relevant verses, right? In the sense of there's a difference of opinion on this. Do not you men marry the mushrikat, women who commit shirk, until they believe. A believing slave woman is better than a mushrika, even if you like her. So this is different when it comes to shirk, but yeah, I'm not going to get too much into the discussion of men marrying non-Muslim Christian or Jewish women. Investigate it for yourself. I will say that I do not advise it. I think that I've seen far too many marriages where Muslim men married non-Muslim women only to end up in divorce, and now their children are not practicing Muslims. And also those who are the people of the book today are not like the people of the book back then. In fact, most of them are basically atheistic, but just claim kind of a religious identity. With that being said, I would love for us to end off here. A reminder of a beautiful verse from the Quran from Surah Baqarah. Fighting has been made obligatory upon you believers, though you dislike it. Perhaps you dislike something which is good for you and like something which is bad for you. Allah knows and you do not know. Right? This applies to a lot of the questions here. How often do we allow for our emotions to be the thing that dictates the actions? And we allow for our emotions, whether it's lack of motivation or the sadness, to allow us to binge watch something or eat food that is not going to be nutritious and healthy for us, or spend hours on social media or watching that we shouldn't be watching, if you catch my drift. How often do we find ourselves, or maybe not you guys, but others may find themselves emotionally attached to a person who is not a person of taqwa, objectively not a person of taqwa, who does haram, who is content with being someone controlled by their desires, who doesn't want to bring themselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who would rather degrade the woman that they are with and maintain haram instead of honoring her and dignifying her and being serious and following the channels of Islam. How often do we find something and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes it away from us? And we might grieve and we might be afraid and we might have some scarcity mindset, but it's better than us because it's better for us because our akhirah is the utmost priority. So with that being said, the authenticity. Let me see. Words of advice should be within the authenticity of autonomy. If a man is saying something that is uncommon towards a woman conducting appropriation of women's rights, a man should be wary. Sada Hannah, you are doing a nice work. Keep up and save us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. I've never had someone mention or call me Ustada. I think it makes me feel older than I actually am. With that being said, everyone, thank you so much. Let me stop sharing. As you can see my face, thank you so much for joining me this week. Inshallah, next week, where are we at? Next week, Thursday, we will not be having a live podcast on Thursday. We will actually be having a panel where, inshallah, I'll be hosting 4 converts to Islam who are going to share their journey to Islam. It's going to be a really interesting panel discussion, inshallah, because I want us not just to focus on the stories of how they came to Islam, but rather how Islam becomes a solution to so many of the modern day ills that we're experiencing and what it offers to the betterment of society. And so it's going to be really, really cool. Saturday, inshallah, at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's 5 p.m. British Standard Time for those of you guys who are there, but the live is already present on my left tab. You can click notifications to turn on. So that's number 1. I would love to see you guys there on Saturday, inshallah, to chat it up in the live chat. Obviously, it's going to be a good time, inshallah. The other thing is, of course, for my sisters who are watching this, if you are wanting to work with me, either one-on-one for coaching, or you are struggling with trauma, you're ready to take charge of your healing, my trauma group coaching application is open. Information on all of that can be found in the description below. If you would like to watch my webinar on how to actually heal trauma without compromising your deen, my webinar is present also in the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you are still here, please hit like on this live so that it gets pushed out to more people. And stay tuned, inshallah. We have some more guests. If you guys haven't been seeing some of the guests that I've been bringing on. We have a few more guests coming on, inshallah, on, I believe it is 2 or 3 weeks from now. We have a hormone expert. She's a woman who specifically deals in natural hormone health, and so I'm really excited to be talking to her. I'm working on bringing a parenting coach, specifically a parenting coach who works with Muslims who are people of color, and so it's interesting to see the dynamic of how we educate our children as Muslims, but all these cultural influence. I get a lot of questions from you guys talking about toxic parenting styles and toxic family dynamics. It's how culture can affect our parenting style. So she's inshallah going to be talking to us about that and how we can make sure that we are creating a family, inshallah, that is super tuned into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants a family to look like, and we take good from culture and leave the rest. So many more guests coming on in the future. Love your support, and I will see you guys in the next one. Give us salam in the live chat before you guys hop away. And if you came in late, you can always watch the replay. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for watching. I know you guys, I know which ones of you guys are the OGs. Subhanallah. I recognize all of the usernames and the names of people who are always commenting and always present on the lives. So, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam to everybody. Wa alaikum assalam. All right.